As we talked about last week, we're going to start there and just go from one to the other. There's no way on earth really to review in Proverbs because it talks about so many subjects. Now, keep in mind, as we're going from verse to verse, in case you haven't been in class before, that each verse will be talking about something different. And then you'll go down maybe 10 verses, and then it'll talk about something that we've just talked about before. And so what the Proverbs are little short, pithy statements and about one verse long, and they in just a few words, they say a great deal and teach us a great deal. And if we looked at them and we say, what really is the purpose of the book of Proverbs? Well, if we would sit down and look at all of them, take the time to write them down and maybe put them in a catalog form where we'd put all the subjects, all the verses throughout there in one section, however we might want to do it. And we say, if we would live by these Proverbs, then we would be living a happy life on this earth. It would be the happiest life that you could possibly live. Under any condition that came along, if you followed these teaching in the book of Proverbs. It tells us a little bit about almost everything that there is in life. Okay, we have 31 verses to cover today, and we have 31 minutes really to cover it. Let's go through there. And so we're going to be going rather rapidly and skipping some, I'm sure, as we go along that's there. And many of these we've already covered and talked about. And as we do it, I'll probably say, now we've talked about that before, remember? And then let's go to the next one. We'll do this. For instance, in verse 1, we've talked about this before, remember? The king's heart is in the hand of Jehovah as the watercourses. He turneth it whithersoever he will. So it's showing that God is in control, and even in the life of kings, that God controls their life, and he turns it just like you turn a water course, just like you turn water on or off or make it flow one way or the other way. He said that's how much control he has over that. Verse 2, that's about the third time, I think, that he said this. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but Jehovah weigheth the hearts. So just stop to think. Whatever we do, we believe it is the right way. But of course, many other Proverbs has said this and shown us that we need to go back and again read Proverbs, read all the other teaching, and do what God says. Because there's so many times that it appears to be right in my eyes for me to do exactly the opposite of what the Lord said should be done. It just looks like that would not be the proper way to do it. Some other way would be the proper way. But now keep in mind that every man's actions are right in his own eyes. This morning, driving down to the church building and seeing people in their cars and going here and here and here and here and wondering where are they going. And one thing that I can tell you, that the people that's running up and down the streets and they're not going to attend services today, they're not going to honor God. Somebody else is maybe opening a bottle at home and going to take their pleasure in drink today. Whatever it is, it seems right in their own eyes. But that doesn't mean that it is right. And when you look at the world and you see how many things people do that are so wrong, so obviously wrong, that people just shake their head. It is so obviously wrong, but they think that it is right in their own eyes. Now, the lesson behind that is to turn it around to me and say, now, when I make a decision, I'm obviously going to make a decision which I believe is right in my own eyes. But do I understand that that's the way everybody makes a decision, and every fool makes that decision, every robber, every thief, everybody who robs a bank, they think this is the thing to do. This is how I can get some money. It's right in their own eyes. And so I need to ask myself, am I making the same mistakes that they made, or am I really patterning my life after the way you would find it in the Scriptures? But it says, to do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to Jehovah than sacrifice. Now, this has been talked about before. It'll be talked about again, I think even today, and that is that when you come into conflict in certain realms, you need to understand that being the right kind of person, having the right kind of heart, doing justice, being obedient to God is more important than even sacrificing to God. Thank you. So if somehow or another you had to make a decision, shall I obey God or shall I offer a sacrifice to God? You obey. That's what he's saying. That's much more acceptable to God. Well, in verse 6, let's go. The getting of treasure by a lying tongue is a vapor driven to and fro by them that seek death. Again, for I don't know how many times we talked about the same thing, that when you attempt to get wealth in an unjust or ungodly way, it's going to come back on you. It's going to backfire, and you're not going to be happy. You're going to live an unhappy life. So he says here, the getting of treasure by a lying tongue is a vapor driven to and fro by them that seek death. So how sturdy, how sure is wealth? If I glean great wealth through lying and deceit, how sure and sturdy is my life? He says it's like vapor that's just blowing here and here and here and here. There's no real foundation behind it. Verse 9, it is better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a contentious woman. Now, at the same time, look down in verse 19. It is better to dwell in a desert land than with a contentious and fretful woman. Well, you look at this in life, and you can see that is true. When you look at women in the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, in fact, throughout the Bible, when you look at the teaching on women and you compare it to real life, you can see it is true. And that is that women have abilities to go to the greatest extremes in the universe. A man cannot go to the extreme that a woman can. For instance, there's nothing on the universe more beautiful than a woman. And there's nothing in the universe uglier than a woman. If you want to show somebody something that's really ugly, that's grotesque, this kind of turns your face, who do they use? They'll use some kind of a woman that's like a witch and dress her up in that type of a garb. And somebody that you just turn your head. On the other hand, nothing more beautiful than a woman. When it comes to morality, I realize that wrong is wrong. When a man does wrong, it's wrong. When a woman does wrong, it's wrong. But a woman has the ability to stand up and at least appear more virtuous than a man. That she can walk and live in such a way that you just naturally look at her and say, there is the most virtuous thing that walks on the universe. On the other hand, there's nothing in the universe that can go lower in life than a woman. If you go down to the bar tonight, walk in and see some men sitting there at the bar, stinking drunk, and you look over and there's a woman stinking drunk, and they're all about to fall off of the bar chair, who are you going to notice? You're going to notice her, and you're going to think, my, how low she has slipped. When you look at a woman in her relationship to man in the Bible teaching, that she is not to be the leader, that man is to be the leader. Man is the head. And you look at this and you see, okay, that's the way it should run. In the family, in the church. But yet there's nothing more powerful and controlling over a man than a woman. That she is such a powerful thing. Remember, God says that a good wife is a gift from God. And so, and here, a bad wife is the most horrible thing that you could possibly have. What I'm trying to point out is that women, inherently within them, have this ability to reach an extreme that man cannot reach in every realm. And so, yeah, women have power over a man. I preach a sermon sometimes that talks about the power of a woman and how she has that power to really control a man. And she doesn't have the power to control him by saying, listen, here's what you're going to do. Very few men would put up with that. They would either walk away or something. They're not going to put up with that kind of talk. But that's not how a woman controls a man. She has her feminine, wily ways of controlling a man, and we talk about them getting their ways. Well, the power of a woman, nothing else like it in the universe. It's the most powerful thing. She controls mankind in doing this. So when we talk about a woman, we're talking about a magnificent creature. We're talking about a creature that was created by God to be the answer for man. And when she functions in that way, there's nothing more beautiful, more helpful, more kind, more sweet, more needful on the face of the earth. But when she goes the other direction and she becomes this complainer, contentious, fretful, arguing, there's nothing that is harder on a man than that. So women, here on Mother's Day, take it to heart. You are a unique creature, and you can fly to the heights in this life and be like something that no man can ever reach. On the other hand, you have the ability to go to the depths or anywhere in between. So this is the thing that I'd point out as we go through here. 13. Whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry, but shall not be heard. So when the poor cry, and we don't help them, then one day we're going to cry, and we're not going to be heard. In other words, this is about the same as when Paul said, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. The Proverbs is saying that you'll be paid back for whatever you sow. Down in verse, I hate to pass over anything, but we've got to pass over some. In verse 15, it is joy to the righteous to do justice, but it is a destruction to the workers of iniquity. Again, talking about this so many times, that a righteous person has their heart set on doing right and seeing justice. But a wicked person has their heart set on destruction, of just trying to destroy, trying to tear up things. And when you look at people in the world, whether it be young people out doing some things, or whether it be congressmen, presidents, kings, whether it be people of power, so oftentimes you look and you say, why would they do that? Why Why would they do such a thing as that? That is so harmful. Why would they do that? And there's no answer in your mind. And you can't come up with anything logical. And you can't say, well, here's the way that they're thinking. It's just so foreign. But keep this in mind. They are doing what they believe is right in their own eyes. And if they are a wicked person, then that's the way they'll lean. That's what they tend to do. 16. The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall rest in the assembly of the dead. So if a man is living in his life, and it's kind of cute the way he puts this, if he wanders out of the assembly of the understanding, he leaves the path, starts walking down a different way than really understanding what life is all about. He's going to end up in the assembly of the dead. So that is, he's going to end up being destroyed. Again, it's said so many times. 17. He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. Now again, this is said many, many times before. See, we're repeating ourselves quite often. That's the reason I'm saying this, is to get us to understand how many times we're repeating ourselves, except in different words. So here it is. He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. Now, you've got to stop and think about this. All of us love pleasure. All of us enjoy doing pleasant things. All of us enjoy eating pleasant foods. Everybody enjoys pleasure that is in life. But what he's talking about is, if this is your way of life, he that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. So now, you really love pleasure. You really love luxury. So what are you going to do? Well, the very minute that you get enough money to make a down payment on a car, you're going to go buy a new car. So you can have the luxury of that new car. You can have the pride of life of people seeing you drive it. As soon as you have the money to buy maybe a new fancy home, that's what you'll do. As soon as you get the ability, have the ability to purchase something that will bring pleasure to you, then that's what you'll do. Now what he says is, that kind of person will end up a poor man. And it's true. You can just see it in life. All you've got to do is just go out and look, and it's kind of a game with me. When I see a young guy and he gets him a pretty good job, and he drives in a big SUV, brand new car, it appears that he's really, really well off in this life. My thoughts are, poor guy, poor guy. What he's doing is just stealing from himself in doing that. Never going to be able to glean any wealth if he goes about it in that way. A man wrote a book one time, a few years ago, and it's entitled The Millionaire Who Lives Next Door. And it points out that you probably would never know if you live next door to a millionaire, because they're not ostentatious. They don't live in luxury. That's how they were able to glean wealth. They live in a normal house, not the Street of Dream house, and they drive a car. The average is 10 years old. So that's the kind of cars that they drive. And so they don't try to put on a front. They don't spend their money trying to bring luxury to their life. Yeah, they live a comfortable life. They're able to do whatever they want to do. But this is what this is talking about here. That when we love, when that's our goal in life, is luxury, pleasure. What can I do for me? How can I enhance my life and show other people how successful I am? Just mark it down. you're never going to be one of those millionaires that lives next door. In verse 19, no, we studied that one, looked at that. 20. There is a precious treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise. Now, this would be just opposite of what the other is, that you have somebody that lives in a wise way, and they're going to have precious treasury and oil, and we've talked about that several times. But a foolish man swalloweth it up. So it just be repeating things. That a wise man can have treasures, and he can have oil, which means luxurious, comfortable living. But the foolish man, he's just going to absorb it and swallow it all up. There. I know a guy now that very, very successful job, very high up in the CEO ranks, and so he had to have a real luxury car. And so he bought that car, $600 and some a month payments. Not long after he did that, he lost his job. And you talk about suffering. And of course, he took the car back, and they said, we don't want it. And he tried to sell it, and everybody says, we don't want it. And so for the past few months, he's just been laboring. What am I going to do? Am I going to lose everything? It's all just right to that point that it looks like I'm probably going to ruin my credit. I'm probably going to lose everything. Well, to make an unhappy story happy, he got down to the point to where he couldn't make them, but he going to get a tax refund. And so he figured, if I can get a tax refund, which is generally about $7,000, I'll be able to pay my payments this month. So he went down and they figured out his taxes. Now that was supposed to end in, if he could get that tax payment, he would be able to make his payments to keep from going broke until the end of March. So first day of April, he had it. So he went down, they figured his taxes and came in and said, well, congratulations, said you have $13,000 coming back. Whew, that'll give me one more month. So that took him through March. And at the April 1st, he got a job. And so, he's going. But he's learned a lesson, and he'll preach a sermon to you now. Never again will I ever buy a car like it. Never again. If I'm going to buy a car on time, I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to do this. And he's learned his lesson, and it will help him all the way through life. Now, of course, Proverbs teaches the same thing over and over and over again. 21. He that falleth after righteousness and kindness findeth life, and righteous and honor. So on the same plane, that if we live instead of for us, if we live instead of trying to be a prideful person and a luxurious person, but our basis is righteousness and kindness, then he says these other things are going to come. That's when you will really find honor. A wise man scaleth the city of the mighty, and bringeth down the strength of the confidence thereof. Again, showing the power of wisdom. A wise man scaleth the walls of a city. Now, we've talked about before, if you go to take a city, you have to climb up walls, stone walls as high as this ceiling. Climb up, go over the wall to conquer the city. That's the reason God at Jericho said, march around it, and I'll make the walls fall down, and then you can go in. So if you're going to conquer a city, that's what you have to do. It's just almost impossible. But what he says, a wise man will be able to conquer a city. Now here, he's talking more than just a city, just going up and a wicked man going up and conquering a city. It's a wise man. A wise man has so much power at his disposal that he's able to conquer a city. This is how he can conquer the problems of life. This is how he can conquer these things in life that cause so many of us so much problems. Wisdom, first 9 chapters of the book of Proverbs, in case we forgot that, all 9 chapters is showing the power of wisdom. 23, again, over and over and over again, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from trouble. How many times have we talked about the gossiper, the whisperer, the friend who tells secrets, the secret teller, and all the trouble that they cause? Well, here it tells us again, whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from trouble. So now, if we go out today and we say, all right, I want to remove one problem from my life. I want to go through life where I can remove at least one problem. This is a good place to start. And that is, keep your mouth and keep your tongue. Don't talk without knowing and considering what you're saying. Don't pass on secrets. Don't pass on rumors. Don't talk about other people. Don't get yourself involved in things that's going to come back on you and going to cause you trouble. Make sure that whatever you say, that if that word gets around to that person, for instance, if you're talking about Rod this afternoon, make sure that whatever you say to this other person, when they say it to another person, and they say it to another person, and then it comes back to you, comes back, in this case, to Rod. And Rod comes to you and says, I want to talk to you. I understand you said something. Will you be able to look him in the face and say, yes, I understand, I said that. And here's the reason I said it. And it is not to cause you any harm, it's to do you good, or will you be able to look him in the face and say, yeah, or will you be caught and say, oh boy, how am I going to get out of this? Because it's going to cause you a lot of trouble. From here on in life, you and Rod probably going to have a strained relationship. You're going to start trying to evade him. And your life is not going to be the pleasant life that it used to be. So, if you want to just take one big problem out of your life, learn how to keep your mouth shut and your tongue quiet. And don't talk about it unless it's your business. Remember, Peter talked about somebody who is a meddler in other men's matters, and that's a sin. And yet it's something that is so common. And when we become meddlers in other men's matters, then unhappiness is going to come back to us. Well, here we've 25, come back to our sluggard again. The desire of the sluggard killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. Just a cute little way of putting it here, to letting us see what a sluggard do. We talked about a sluggard being so lazy, they'll put their spoon in the dish, and it's just so much work to lift it and put it in their mouth, he said, that's what a sluggard will do. Well, here, he puts it in this way, the desire of the sluggard killeth him, and his hands refuse to labor. A sluggard's hand, they just will not, they will just not go to work. They will do whatever they can to make him happy, but they will not go to work. Well, helping the poor again, 26, there is that coveteth greedily all the day long. That is, there is a person, people, they covet all day long, but the righteous giveth and withholdeth not. So you'll give and help people. 27, the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. How much more when he bringeth it with a wicked mind? Now here we found several things that's an abomination to the Lord. But the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination. Now we might think if a person is wicked, and if they make a sacrifice to God in whatever way it is, surely that would be pleasing to God. But he said, no. The sacrifice of a wicked person is an abomination to him. I want you to straighten out your life. Become a righteous person before you lift your eyes to heaven and say, I'm going to offer a gift unto God. So he said it's an abomination. And then that last part, he says, how much more when he bringeth it with a wicked hand? So when he brings this abomination to God, or with a wicked mind, he brings this abomination to God, he not only brings it having been a wicked person, but he's got a wicked mind. He's got a wrong purpose in mind. He's offering the gift to God, perhaps to pacify God, so that God will not hold him accountable for some of the wickedness he's done. So it's with the wrong purpose. So he said, what it's saying here is that it's an abomination for wicked people to offer sacrifice to God, and how much more when they come to do it in a wicked way. Let's go to 30. There is no wisdom, nor understanding, nor counsel against Jehovah. Now, we might give some counsel and against Jehovah. You might come, you might ask me what you should do. I give you some counsel, give you some advice, and it's opposite of what God's Word says. What he says is there is no counsel or advice in that. What you would call my advice is not advice. It just, I don't know how to come up with a word. It's not advice. It's tending to lead you into the wrong path. So what he's saying is, don't ever think that there's any counseling involved in any advice that people give you unless it is in harmony with God's will. If it's opposed to God, it's not there. And then 31, the horse is prepared against the day of battle, but victory is of Jehovah. Now, a horse was the most powerful warring instrument they had at that time. And they had prepared that horse like we do with our mighty weapons today. So we prepare these for battle, but keep in mind the battle belongs to God. Okay, class dismissed.